So get this is an update that nerfs every single weapon in the game, including the diamond sword, so it does just 6 attack damage, nerfing all stone weaponry, so they're the exact same as their wooden counterparts. As you can see, 4 attack damage here, and 5 attack damage here and here, but as well as doing both those things, we've seen the axe still be the most prevalent weapon in the game once you enchant it, dealing 10 attack damage compared to a fully enchanted diamond sword of just 9, but as well as all of those changes to weaponry, we've also seen a change to the way food works, because if you do get injured and you try to eat with food, 2 big changes have been made. One is it takes longer to eat, about 25% longer, and 2, you don't get the super saturation effect. You have to wait for it to heal you just like you did before. This is a crazy change to the way that Minecraft works, and let me explain why all of this has been done, because there is a rhyme, there is a reason, and let me explain in today's video. So this is the experimental combat snapshot V5. This is Jeb's 5th attempt at rebalancing combat for the 2020 versions to have a consistent combat system between versions, because right now a lot of people have never updated past the combat update, a 2016 update which changed combat in its entirety in so many different ways, and because of that they've always been working on ways to bring people together, and this is their best shot so far, what looks like one of the final experimental combat snapshots, because yeah, basically Jeb has been trying to gather feedback from all over, from all these different communities to bring the game together in some way, and this is the latest attempt. So long story short, this is all of them put together. This is a public accessible way now. It's on the Minecraft.my website. This is the most official form of snapshot we've seen so far, and it gives the hint that these are closest towards the end, but it's also some of the most sweeping changes, if you forgive the combat update pun, because you can see just how many things have been changed here, with attack rates now getting faster than they were in previous things, and also you're only allowed to attack when the thing's there. You can't have those weak attacks between attacks. You have to wait for the combat cooler to finish now, but that on the one hand, although it means you can't attack as much if you want to spam click, it means you'll always be able to attack at full strength. None of this like waiting and working out timers and not really knowing it precisely. The attack timer will only reset when attacking, not when we're switching items anymore. You can keep pressing the attack button continuously to attack. You can hold it down if you want to as well, which is pretty nutty. Weapons deal less damage overall. That's the weapons nerf. Weapons have different reach. Tridents and hoe reach further. Axes reach less. Natural healing from food has been rebalanced. No more saturation boost. For real, the saturation boost, which used to be one of the big strengths of the Java combat system and one of the things people loved about that system, and even when it existed on console, it's not going to be here in the new combat system, as well as projectiles being more accurate and not inheriting the shooter's momentum. Experimental enchantment called chopping for axes, that's the ones that make an enchanted axe more powerful than an enchanted sword, and many other small changes to tridents, snowballs, shields, etc. And in case you want to read the actual breakdown compared to the last snapshot alone, which is what we'll be focusing on here because I have covered those before, basically weapons have been significantly rebalanced, so the stone tier is now exactly the same as wood, iron tier is only a small boost, diamond tier is only, again, a much smaller boost than it was before, swords are, again, lower than before, axes are lower, and the trident has also been nerfed. Basically, pretty much every weapon in the game, besides wood actually, wood has remained pretty steady, every weapon in the game has had 1 damage removed, which seems small on the surface, but it's actually kind of a big deal when you consider them all together, as we're about to go into, and also the base damage is now going to be matching bedrock, so your fist doesn't deal 1 damage, it does 2. In short, to put that simply, when you go in Minecraft from having a fist damage to a wooden sword, you actually only double your attack damage. Even fist to a stone sword is now only doubling your attack damage, and a fist to a diamond sword is tripling it. Of course, that's still worth doing. Everyone's going to agree that you should, in fact, triple your attack damage, but it's pretty nutty to me that it's only triple from literally attacking things. You know, let me find something to attack right here. The difference from literally attacking something with just your fist is going to be only that much less than attacking it with something, but that is the real part of this update. Okay, I'm really sorry it had to be a baby chick, but we need to prove this point, okay? So punch the baby chick once with a fist, punch it again twice, and you're gonna see how it dies. Do the same thing with a stone sword, and it will die in just a single hit, because that's all it's gonna take, which, punching chicks to death is definitely not my favorite thing to do in this update, but the fact that it's now significantly easier to do with your fist is quite notable, given that the fist has been buffed and the wooden has been staying the same. At the same time, everything else gets nerfed. This creates a much smaller gap between things, which is we can talk about later, but first let's go back to the list. Because you can see, looking at this exact same list, that eating food is now slower. It's actually gone from 32 to 40 ticks. That is a 25% increase. Natural healing works longer, down to 6 food points, used to be down to 18. Basically, you can your natural healing will work all the way down your bar until you get to that last bit, where previously you couldn't sprint. However, as you're going to read right here, sprinting is no longer affected. You can do that all the way down the bar if you want to. Natural healing now drains food points. Saturation is not used when healing damage is only relevant as a pause until food drains. They clarify here that that's as originally intended, intended. And to explain what that means, because that sounds a bit confusing, basically saturation was only meant to be a big pause between when you eat food now and when you have to eat it in the future when doing basic actions. It sounds like, again, according to this wording right here, which means that now that's what it's going to be doing again. Pretty wacky and pretty huge change right there. Various block kicking and air swing bug fixes made it possible to hit players with snowballs, which previously used to be like a server rule thing, although it looks like they want to be able to turn that off as well as on. Reintroduced upwards knockback when hitting players in the air. Probably too strong right now, but can be balanced later. You know, this thing right here, that's upwards knockback if you want to do that, which is going to be nutty for the PvP experience if this does stay for the final versions. Changed the swing animation to emphasize the rhythm of attacks and added a cooldown to the egg, which was really just there so they could match the, it was only really there so they could match the snowball, of course. But this means, again, if we just do something really wacky right here, this means because both the egg and the snowball have a cooldown, but because they're separate cooldowns, because they're separate items, then there's the really weird world where, you know, if we're firing snowballs, it works like this. It goes at a pretty fast rate, but if we switch back and forth between the two, what we can actually do is we can mix in an egg over every now and then, and we can fire really, really fast, which is nutty to me that there's now like some skill in using one than the other. By the way, since we had face cam for the reading of the thing, should we have face cam here? You're not sure. Let's do it. Look, guess what? This is a Minecraft news video where I'm going to be talking to you about things because these are some pretty key changes. So next up, let's talk about the fact that, as you can see, looking at my health bar right here, we have 3, hunger bars, and therefore we're not going to regenerate any off our stuff, but if we go up to 7 by eating, then we would. But first, I just want to show you that we can also sprint even though we're at that lower health level, because now sprinting you can do all the way until your death. This is a pretty big change because it's basically removed the penalty for sprinting and moved it as a healing thing instead, meaning that now by having just 7 hunger bars, which, you know, previously was pretty dire, it meant nothing to you, 7 is enough for you to heal from, as you just saw happen right there. That was a huge change we just saw of the hunger bar, and that is not the least of the changes here. Because like I mentioned, so like the diamond axe is now stronger than the diamond sword, which a lot of people look at and say, oh, this again, this isn't how it should be. But I mean, if we ignore the fact that the speed is different, which it was in 1.9 as well. I mean, if we, again, you can see just how long it takes to fully recharge this thing. Like can you see the way it's lifting up right there compared to the diamond sword, which is much, much faster. So not only can you do more damage per second using a sword than an axe, which in my opinion would be a fair enough nerf by itself, but also if we grab ourselves real quick a monster, you can see right here that the damage we can hit with from an axe has to be, you know, like you have to recharge to get the full damage done. If you keep spam clicking, you can't attack at even the normal distance because the axe is now a short range weapon, whereas the sword does a normal amount of range, as we can see right here. It's going to be able to do a free attack reach as opposed to 2.5, which is for the axe. But then also, here's the craziest bit, we now have the trident, which can do even better than either of those because this has a 3.5. So even though this leaves us with a really weird hierarchy where it's like, so if we place, okay, let's have 3 weapons right here. If you place them in order of damage, you get, obviously, you get the axe first, then you get the sword if it's fully enchanted, then you get the loyalty trident. However, if you place them in terms of unenchanted, if we remove these away, then you get the axe tied with the trident, although because of the attack speed being the same, the reach puts this one above, and then you get the sword being in last, so pure damage puts them in this order. When it's enchanted, it's the reverse order, but when you go in terms of damage per second, you get the sword first, you get the trident second, and then you get the enchanted, and then you get the regular axe third, or you get the enchanted axe as a second kind of thing. Which is wacky to me that, like, oh yeah, these 3 weapons, the trident, the diamond axe, and the diamond sword, actually are all viable enough weapons. But unlike, before where like they were viable in different ways, the diamond sword is the go-to for 90% of players, but these are now niche side weapons as opposed to entirely worthless. And I love that about this update. They're trying to make other weapons worthwhile without making them too worthwhile that they become OP. The sword should always be the go-to weapon because it's literally a sword, and I think they acknowledge that, which is why it's kind of cool in my opinion. So the other thing that I find kind of cool about this, beyond those changes, because again, that is a serious change, nerfing swords down to that level seems like a silly change. Like, so, you know, we're talking about them in general, but why nerf them down to 6 and 5, etc.? Why don't nerf them down to 6, 7, down to 4, etc.? But the reason to me seems pretty clear. I think they want to lessen the impact of your sword as the main determinant in who wins combat. Right now, if someone comes up to you with an enchanted diamond sword, you have a non-enchanted diamond sword, you dead. If you have diamond sword, someone has a wooden sword, it's so over. There's not even really a point fighting unless you're like double as skilled as them in terms of how many hits you can land. Your sword is such a big determinant right next to armor as far as what decides who wins combat, but if you make everything a bit closer, then every other factor becomes important too. The enchantments become way more important because they take it from 6 to 9 now, as opposed from 7 to 10. It's a, it's a bigger percentage difference. Potions of strength, etc. They're a much bigger percentage impact, and all these things, even though it just lowers the damage by 1, which most players won't notice except in PvE scenarios. In PvP, this allows for every other factor to be slightly more important. And although we don't know until it goes on servers as to whether people will care about enchantments and potions as much as they care about just getting stuff the fastest, I really want to see how this one interacts with that, because it sounds like they finally tried to work in all the new weapons into combat rather than adding them to the game, making them fun and goofy but not making them viable. That is the big fun, cool part of this update. However, it's not the only part of this update, so as well as upwards knockback, which is super hard to show off right here, let me talk about something else which is interesting, which is that they've made, firing much more accurate. And this is a really weird one to say in my opinion, because, again, it might seem like, so what do you really mean by that? By the way, notice how I'm healing at this level of, hunger bar, something that wouldn't have happened before, and something that's saving my life right now. So even though that immediate boost is much less than it was before, so even though the immediate boost from eating a steak or a golden carrot, these super high-end foods, isn't as fast as it was before, we can't immediately heal up by getting into a corner, the ongoing boost is much bigger. Again, one steak is now effectively, because it heals 8 hunger points, it's effectively going to heal you 8 health points as well, or 4 hearts to be more precise. But like the fact that one steak is worth 4 hearts pretty much no matter what is a much more consistent way to implement the old Minecraft principles from way back in the day, and it means that literally just 2 steaks can get you pretty much all the way, and 3 steaks will get you all the way to the top. This does lessen the impact of golden carrots in PvP situations, but in terms of pure survival, it's still going to be just as good. Whether it's worth making or not is up to you, I guess. But yeah, they made some big changes in that way that I find hugely interesting. But we've got other changes to the projectile system, because again, if we fire our arrows, previously there was a huge variance. You can see this so significantly when you fire an arrow somewhere. Now you can see that if you're aiming at something, you should be able to hit it. This is significant. Look at how close those arrows are. There'd be nothing close to that before. Let's even go for a further away target. Let's aim at the diamond block, the block for the diamond hill over there. If we try and land on that, let's try and do there. So if we fire all these in the exact same position, previously they'd all go on different blocks entirely. A lot of aiming with bows was really based down on the luck that you had, whereas right now you can see that as long as we have the same strength in the bow, this is how closely grouped they are even at this distance. The bow is now going to be an actual skill-based game because every single one of those arrows landed on the same block, even within the same little part of the same block, meaning that you can hit every single one of your shots at a target if you know where to aim. Now aiming is going to be based on aiming as opposed to aiming and knowing where the randomness goes, which is huge. It's the equivalent of I don't know, aiming down a sight instead of hip firing, in terms of the difference that it's made. And I really think that's going to be pretty huge for both the the bow as well as the crossbow, of course. The changes that I think are just objectively bad, though, are the changes in terms of how long it takes you to eat a food. If we want to eat this steak, it now takes 25% longer, and you really do notice that every time. I feel like having more time to eat isn't necessarily a great change. I can see why they're doing it for PvP, but it's not something I love. And the other change that they've made is they've made it faster, because right now it was every 3 seconds roughly that you would heal up from your hunger bar to your main bar, whereas now it's been turned into every 3 seconds. Basically, in exchange for 25% more time to eat, there's now 33% less time for your eating to turn into actual stuff, as well as it will last for longer. And obviously that means that staying filled with food is going to be more important. But also, I really don't like taking more time to eat. It's something that to me is associated with lag. Again, probably not to Jeb, does Jeb probably doesn't play on too many laggy Minecraft servers, but when you see it take that little bit longer, it just feels bad. It just is inherently not a good feeling. And obviously, given that this whole combat change is a lot about feeling, that's something that really should be mentioned as an important little change. So yeah, we now have the saturation system from Bedrock. We have the punching system from Bedrock too, which is wacky when you think about that one. A lot of stuff has been kind of implemented to bridge from Bedrock to Java, and that's why I think this might be one of the last snapshots. Oh, and just for that last change, in case you're curious, because the time you're going to notice it the most, the time I feel like it's specifically mentioned about, is that now the momentum of you doesn't affect the momentum of things you fire, which means, as you can see, the based on we can fire our arrows like we're not going at super fast speeds, which is pretty cool if you ask me. It's pretty weird, and although this is going to affect a lot of people in a lot of ways, I don't think it's necessarily negative or positive. It's one of those things I think really the community is going to have to shape. Personally, though, I like it. It's one that, to me, this seems more consistent with what you'd expect. If you're going fast, your arrows shouldn't, like, those things should be based on each other in the same way when you fire a gun from a car. I saw the example on the Reddit. There's a lot of like wacky things I see of that. But yeah, this is my overall opinions on this combat because, we've gone over every individual line change and how I think they're all mostly positive. I think when you add them all together, though, you get something that is, again, mostly positive, but leaves a few key rooms for improvement. The saturation nerf is going to make a lot of PvE players unhappy. The nerf to every single weapon in the game, Diamond Sword's going down to 6, that is actually going to affect people more than you might figure. And in case you're curious, it's like, well, what's 1 damage really going to do, Toy Cat? Let me give you an example, right? Because, the creeper over here has, of course, it has, I think it's 20 health. But if we attack the creeper 3 times now, it doesn't die. A creeper needs 4 hits to die with a diamond sword now, which is pretty significant when you think about that as a proportion of its current thing. You need to hit your criticals right now if you want to kill a creeper, but now even with those criticals, it takes 3 hits to kill. That is a significant nerf, even though it's 1 attack damage. It doesn't affect PvP players too much, but it affects PvE quite significantly. The fact, again, taking 3 criticals or 4 regular hits to kill with a diamond sword, I mean, even an enchanted diamond sword, notice how it's going to be 3 hits to kill. That is insane, if you ask me. Obviously, this means creepers and zombies and those type of skeletons as well are much bigger of a deal, and it's another addition to Minecraft getting harder for standard player versus PvEs, player versus environment, or enemies players. I never know which one it is, but like that's a significant nerf for people like that, and whether that's something worth caring about, I guess, is down to whether you care about the PvE experience. But yeah, this is another nerf, or this is another buff to Minecraft mobs effectively. By nerfing all the weapons, they've buffed that, and that's quite strong. I think the bow change, who can hate this, right? Like, now where you aim with the bow is where you fire with the bow. Who doesn't love that? The multi-shot change is still one of my favorite things in Minecraft. If you don't know, multi-shot is now, all 3 things can hit the same target, which is absolutely wonderful, right? So like, there's a lot of like really cool changes in this update that I think are quite significant, but I feel like taking longer to eat, this is just going to annoy people more than it has any benefits. I feel like removing the saturation boost for Java players who have been used to it is going to be a big deal. For Bedrock players, I mean, I kind of like the new system better than our current system, but, I'm obviously basing that from a system with no super fast saturation. I feel like being able to sprint anytime also feels a bit weird, but also feels right. And being able to heal anytime, even when you've got super low, actually, let's go back. Even when you've got a super low, hunger thing, it feels a bit weird, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So, yeah, my overall impressions on this is pretty good. Not perfectly there. We'd probably have to do one last iteration where we somehow find the balance on the saturation healing thing. But as far as the weapons, if their intention is to buff PvE, they've done a good job at it. If it isn't, if they don't communicate that there is a buff to that, you're going to annoy a lot of players. And yeah, as far as most other things, the balance between weapons, it's pretty good personally. I really like... I will still use a diamond sword most of the time, but I like that there's a genuine argument for using the diamond axe. One of those, by the way, it would be the creepers, right? Because, I mean, like, if you want to attack, a creeper and kill it in 2 hits instead of 3, you use a diamond axe of chopping on it. So, yeah, new enchantment, new weapons, new entire hunger system, all seems really good to me. I'm super hyped about it all, but that's my opinion. I'd love to know yours in the comments down below, because obviously this, these changes are going to affect people who play the game in hugely different ways to me, and I'd love to hear about how it affects you, your case scenario in the comments down below. And yeah, overall though, I'm gonna give this like two Toy Cat thumbs up, and I'm gonna read in those comments because I really am super curious about how this impacts all of you. But for now, thank you very much for watching this video. There's some other news that I want to cover fairly soon. Like we saw Helen Angel confirm that Hardcore is in fact one of the super soon changes they're planning for Bedrock. A lot of cool changes like that I hope come alongside this as far as Bedrock goes, but we'll talk about that in a separate video if you are curious about the whole Bedrock thing, because there is a lot of changes happening over there that I'm super hyped about. But for now, you can follow me on Twitter if you want to read about that, or you can obviously check the the community post we do here. But for now, I hope you'll enjoy this video. Subscribe, notifications turned on to boost my ego, because I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.